At 1 in the morning on July 10, 2023, on a stretch of US 41 near Monroe Station, in the dark at the edge of Big Cypress National Preserve, a 22-year-old named Jake Walleri got out of a vehicle and took hold of a snake in the middle of the road. It fought him. It tried to bite him more than once, and for about 3 minutes, he could not get a grip on its head. He said afterward that it was the only snake he had ever encountered that frightened him badly enough that he did not know what to do. When it was over, the animal was measured at 19 feet, the longest Burmese python ever documented in Florida, and according to the biologist who recorded it, possibly the longest of its species measured anywhere on Earth. It ran as a record, a trophy photo, a local news hit, a number in a database. It was none of those things. Because the animal in that road was, strictly speaking, not a Burmese python. And depending on which geneticist you ask, it may not belong to any species that exists in the wild anywhere else on the planet. It would mean less if it were the only one. There are tens of thousands of them. The records keep breaking, and they keep breaking upward. In 2012, the state's largest was 17 feet and 165 pounds, carrying 87 eggs. In 2020, 18 feet 9. In 2022, a female pulled out of the Everglades weighed 215 pounds, the heaviest ever recorded. Then the 19-footer in 2023. These are animals that in their native range are large at 10 to 16 feet. Something in southern Florida is producing snakes at the extreme upper edge of what the animal is supposed to be capable of, and producing them faster than anyone can count. And the snake from that road became the proof of what that size means. It ended up as a specimen in a study led by Bruce Jane at the University of Cincinnati, working with the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. 3 of the largest pythons ever taken in the state, measured for gape, the maximum width the mouth can stretch. The previous record was 22 centimeters. These animals came in at 26. That sounds like a small difference. It is not. Because area scales with the square of the radius, the swallowing capacity went up by 40%. A circumference of over 80 centimeters, roughly a 32-inch waistband. And the biggest pythons opened wider than the mathematical models predicted they should. Extrapolate to the top of the species, and you get a gape around 30 centimeters. Wide enough, Jane calculated, to swallow a white-tailed deer of about 128 pounds or an alligator over 200. This is not theoretical. One of the other snakes in that study, a 14.5-foot female weighing 115 pounds, was found in the middle of swallowing a 77-pound deer, an animal 2/3 of her own body mass, taking up 93% of the space her jaws could physically make. The biologist who watched it said it is not something you forget. This is the space the whole story lives in. Nobody disputes that the snakes are there. This is not a cryptid, it is an infestation across more than 1,000 square miles. What is genuinely unresolved is what the animal actually is, and why a population that by every measure in the textbook should be collapsing has instead become one of the most successful vertebrate invasions in recorded history. To see the problem, the names have to be made exact. Python bivitatus, the Burmese python, native to Southeast Asia, a wetland animal among the 5 largest snakes on Earth, and Python molurus, the Indian python, a separate species, smaller, faster, and, critically, a creature of drier ground. In Asia, these two are not supposed to blend. They are kept apart by habitat, the Burmese in the swamps, the Indian on the high, dry country. In the wild, they largely do not meet, and where they do not meet, they do not breed. They met in cages. Between roughly 1996 and 2006, on the order of 90 to 100,000 baby pythons were imported into the United States for the pet trade, a great many of them destined for Florida. In that trade, animals from different origins and different species sat in adjacent enclosures and adjacent breeding programs, sorted by what a buyer wanted, rather than by where they came from. And in 2018, a team of US Geological Survey researchers, led by the geneticist Margaret Hunter, published what came out the other end of that. They sequenced mitochondrial DNA, inherited only from the mother, from 426 snakes taken across southern Florida, from the Keys to Big Cypress to Miami-Dade, and ran microsatellite analysis on 389 of them. 13 of those snakes carried mitochondrial signatures belonging not to the Burmese python, but to the Indian python. The nuclear DNA told a stranger story still. The population sorted into 2 genetically distinct groups, plus a third, admixed group, and the admixture was not confined to any one region. The technical term for the mismatch between the maternal line and the nuclear genome is cytonuclear discordance. And what it means in plain language is that the snakes in the Everglades are a blend of 2 species that, in nature, keep away from each other. And the timing points somewhere uncomfortable. The researchers concluded the interbreeding most likely happened before the invasion, not in the swamp, but upstream of it, either along the edges where the 2 species ranges meet in Asia, or, more probably, inside the trade itself. Which means the animal in that road at 1 in the morning was not something the Everglades produced. The blend arrived pre-made. Florida simply supplied the one landscape on Earth that is wet and dry at once, and let it go. The word the geneticists used for what that can do is hybrid vigor. When 2 species combine, the strongest traits of each can be selected in the offspring. As Hunter put it, that can mean a better ability to adapt to environmental stress and change, and in an invasive population, a broader or more rapid spread. The parent species divide the world between wetland and dry ground. The blend does not have to choose, which brings us to the part that should not work, and does. By the ordinary rules of invasion biology, this population should be failing. The 2018 analysis found the average relatedness among Florida's pythons sits somewhere between first and second cousins. The entire population is inbred. Genetic diversity is low. The effective population size came back around 315, far lower than you would expect for an infestation this size. A founding group that small, that closely related, is the textbook recipe for a collapse. Inbreeding depression, reduced fertility, accumulating defects, a population that sputters out. Instead, it ate the Everglades. In 2012, a team led by Michael Dorcas published the numbers in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, built from road surveys covering nearly 57,000 kilometers across 313 nights. Compared with the years before the pythons took hold, raccoon sightings had fallen by 99.3%, opossums 98.9%, bobcats 87.5%, deer 94%. They did not record a single rabbit, not reduced, functionally erased, across hundreds of thousands of acres of one of the most protected landscapes in the United States. Researchers describe what is left behind as a simplified ecosystem, rodents and other invasives, in a place that used to be full of mammals, and it is still moving. Radio-tagged pythons have been recorded traveling up to a mile a day. They have been seen swimming 15 miles from shore. They spend most of their lives in water, and Florida is a state stitched together by canals, which is exactly how the front line keeps creeping north into Palm Beach County and beyond, with researchers now warning that isolated populations can establish before anyone detects them at all. Cold is supposed to be the wall. Hard freezes have killed up to 90% of pythons in exposed areas. But genomic data indicates natural selection in Florida is already favoring increased thermal tolerance. The wall is being climbed in real time by an animal that has been in the country for about 40 years. And here is the part that reframes everything, because this is not a story about people failing to look. Florida looks harder than almost anyone has ever looked for a wild animal. There is a state-run competition every year. The most recent completed edition drew 934 participants from 30 states and Canada, and in 10 days of concentrated effort, they removed 294 snakes, the highest total in the event's history. The winner alone accounted for 60 of them. And here is the number that frames it. Since that challenge was launched in 2013, across every edition combined, it has removed roughly 1,400 snakes. That is the flagship program over 13 years. There are also paid contractors, detector dogs, traps, radio-tagged scout snakes that lead biologists to others, and environmental DNA sampling of the water itself. and the animal still cannot be found. In 2020, researchers published detection probabilities for Burmese pythons in the Journal of Herpetology, built from 59 visual surveys covering nearly 1,200 person-kilometers alongside radiotelemetry. The detection probability came back between roughly 1 in 70 and 1 in 10,000, depending on method, under 5% by any measure. In an earlier trapping study, 2 types of traps produced 3 pythons in 5,935 trap nights. Standardized visual surveys in that same work produced no sightings at all. The only 2 snakes seen were seen by accident. Researchers estimate that something like 1% of the pythons out there are ever detected. Read that again. These are trained people, with radio collars telling them roughly where the snake is, walking transects designed to find it, and walking past it. A 19-foot animal, the width of a fence post, in a landscape people search professionally, is invisible at will, which is the objection every skeptic raises, and it deserves a direct answer because the loudest version of this story is overblown. The hybrid super snake headline is hype, and the answer comes in 3 parts. The first is proportion. 13 snakes out of 426 carried the Indian python maternal signature. That is a real finding, and a minority one. Most of the animals out there are, by the maternal line, straightforward Burmese pythons. The second is that hybrid vigor here is a hypothesis, not a demonstrated mechanism. Nobody has shown that the admixed snakes grow larger, survive better, or breed faster than the others. It is a plausible explanation for a pattern, not a measured effect. The third is that the invasion may need no exotic explanation at all. South Florida is subtropical, water-rich, prey-saturated, and contains essentially nothing capable of killing an adult python. Put the world's 5th largest snake into that, and you would expect an explosion whether or not any hybridization ever occurred. Honesty requires going further, because Hunter herself said it plainly. Her study does not indicate that a new species of super snake has been unleashed on the Everglades. The interbreeding most likely happened before these animals ever reached Florida, so this is not some ongoing genetic experiment in the swamp. The tidy Hurricane Andrew origin story, the Category 5 that flattened a breeding facility holding more than 900 snakes near what became the epicenter of the infestation in August of 1992, is at best a partial truth. Pythons were being seen in the Everglades in the 1980s, and most experts now treat Andrew as an accelerant rather than the cause. And for all the dread these animals carry, there has never been a recorded death of a person from a wild python in Florida. But conceding all of it does not make the animal ordinary. The genetics are not in dispute, only the interpretation. The Florida population genuinely is composed of distinct lineages, and the researchers' own conclusion was that this gives it greater standing variation for adaptation and the potential for a broader range of suitable habitat than a single species would have. That is not a headline, that is the finding. Because the real claim is more precise than the myth. The science does not say a super snake was engineered. It says something narrower and considerably worse. That the exotic pet trade carried a blend of 2 species that avoid each other in nature. That the blend was loosed into the one landscape that suits both parents at once, and that the resulting population, inbred, genetically impoverished, and by every rule in the book destined to fail, instead emptied the mammals out of the largest subtropical wilderness in the United States, and is now moving north through the canal system faster than 1,000 trained searchers can find 1% of it. So it ends where it began, at 1 in the morning on a road at the edge of Big Cypress, with a 22-year-old holding onto 19 feet of an animal that fought back for 3 minutes and frightened him in a way nothing else ever had. It was a record. It was also, genetically, a thing that does not occur in the wild anywhere on Earth. Carried here through the trade, released into a swamp, and grown to a size its own species is not supposed to reach. It was found because it happened to be lying on a road, in headlights, at the exact moment somebody drove past. Everything else out there is in the water tonight, in the sawgrass and the canals and the culverts running north, in numbers nobody can count, being looked for by people who will walk within a few feet of them and never know.